My father forgot me every Christmas until I bought a manor. My name is Mallory Hale. I was 34, and on Christmas Eve I stood behind an interior door while the man who raised me broke into my home through a security monitor. I watched my father lead a locksmith across the porch. My stepmother followed, directing movers as though she owned the place. My stepbrother carried evictions. Their friend held up a lease bearing my copied signature and ordered the lock opened. I waited until all four crossed the threshold. Then I stepped into the dark entrance hall and said, "You were warned in writing to stay away." My father raised the lease and told the workers to keep unloading. Officers entered from the service corridor and front door. Camera flashes exploded around him. A detective lifted my real deed beside the forged document. My father's face collapsed. "No, this can't be happening. Don't do this." Before I explain why he believed my home belonged to him, tell me where you are watching from and what Christmas weather looks like outside your window. My mother died when I was 11, and my father remarried before the next Christmas. Her name was Laura Hale, and after the funeral, my father, Dean Bennett, packed away nearly everything that reminded him of her. When Valerie entered our house, she brought her 12-year-old son, Trevor, and Dean threw himself into proving he could be the father Trevor had never had. At first, I thought his effort would expand our family. Instead, it quietly replaced me. No one announced that I mattered less. They simply made decisions as though I had already agreed to disappear. When I was 15, Dean planned a Christmas trip to Colorado. He talked about it for weeks, showing Trevor ski videos and asking Valerie which cabin had the best view. At the airport, the agent found 4 reservations, but only 3 tickets. Dean stared at the screen, then looked at me as though I had caused an accounting error. Valerie said changing everything would be expensive. Trevor suggested I stay with a neighbor because I did not even like skiing. Dean snorts, handed me cab money, and promised we would celebrate when they returned. Their holiday photographs arrived before they did, during college. A Christmas card came to my dorm. On the front, Dean, Valerie, and Trevor stood in matching sweaters beneath the words, "The Bennett family." My name appeared nowhere. Inside, Dean had written, "Hope finals went well. Call when you have time." I called that night. Valerie answered and said they were opening gifts, so it was not a good moment. 2 days later, Dean contacted me because Trevor had been charged twice for a laptop and needed help disputing the purchase. At 29, I drove to their house for Christmas and learned that my old bedroom had been given to Valerie's sister and her husband. My suitcase was placed beside a folding cot in the basement laundry room. Dean said it was only practical because I was single and stayed for fewer nights. Trevor had the entire guest suite, although he lived 20 minutes away. I left before midnight. Dean did not ask why. The next morning, he emailed a contractor's invoice and wanted me to check whether the labor charges looked inflated. That was how my father remembered me. I disappeared from photographs, reservations, bedrooms, and dinner plans. But I reappeared whenever numbers became inconvenient. I reviewed insurance forms. I corrected bookkeeping mistakes. I lent Trevor money twice, once for a certification course he never completed, and once for an apartment deposit he spent on a launch party. Dean always called those requests family matters. My invitations somehow were optional. I built a life that did not require his attention. I became a senior land records analyst for a title insurance company in Baltimore, examining deeds, easements, liens, ownership histories, and disputed signatures before commercial properties changed hands. The work taught me that ownership was not a feeling, a promise, or the loudest person in a room. It was a chain of verifiable facts. Dates mattered. Signatures mattered. Notice mattered. I never imagined those habits would become the barrier between my father and the front door of my home. I also stopped using Bennett. professionally and personally. I became Mallory Hale. It was my mother's name, and choosing it felt less like rejecting my father than refusing to be erased with her. The last Christmas I spent at Dean's house ended the pattern. Valerie texted that dinner would begin at 6 o'clock and told me to arrive whenever traffic allowed. I left Baltimore early, carried a wrapped gift basket through sleet, and reached their dining room at 6:14. Every chair was occupied. Every plate had food on it. There was no empty setting, not even a folded napkin. Dean glanced up and said the final count had been confirmed days earlier. I reminded him Valerie had invited me. He lowered his voice and asked me not to embarrass him in front of relatives. Trevor snorts, leaned back with a drink and laughed. "Mallory is independent," he said. "She does not need traditions like the rest of us." I set the gift basket on the counter and left without arguing. At 11:30 that night, Dean sent a message. He did not apologize or ask whether I had arrived home safely. He wanted me to review Trevor's business accounts before year-end because several deposits did not reconcile. I read the message twice, blocked all 3 of them, and opened a real estate site. Before dawn, a listing appeared for Ashbourne Manor in Blackwood, Maryland, 11 months later. I signed the closing papers for Ashbourne Manor in Blackwood, Maryland. The purchase price was $1,600,000. I used savings, sold part of my investment portfolio, and financed the balance through a conventional mortgage that had been examined by people who did not care about my family history. By 3 o'clock that afternoon, the deed was recorded in my name alone. Ashbourne was impressive from the road and exhausting up close. A section of slate roof needed replacement. The heating system belonged in a museum. 5 upstairs rooms were empty except for dust sheets, and 2 bathrooms had plumbing that complained whenever a faucet turned. Yet, the ballroom floor was level, the commercial-sized kitchen remained structurally sound, and the detached carriage house had enough space for my office. I did not buy it to impress anyone. I bought it because the records were clean, the price reflected the repairs, and I wanted one Christmas in a place where no one could forget to set a chair for me. My plan was deliberately slow. I would stabilize the roof, replace the boiler, restore one room at a time, and use the carriage house for remote title research. A local newspaper ran an article about the sale because the property had belonged to the same family for nearly 70 years. The article included my name, the purchase price from public records, and one photograph of me holding the old brass key. 3 days later, an unfamiliar number called. I answered because I was waiting for a roofing estimate. Dean's voice said, "So, it is true." He did not ask how I was. He did not say congratulations. His first questions were whether the ballroom still held 200 people, whether the kitchen retained commercial permits, and how many cars could fit near the east lawn. I asked why he cared. He said Curtis Bell, an acquaintance who handled business paperwork for him, had seen the article and recognized my name. Then Dean introduced the emergency he expected me to solve. Trevor's company, North Star Celebrations, had accepted deposits for weddings at a converted mill outside Annapolis. The county closed that venue after repeated code violations. Trevor had no replacement location, 14 angry couples, and no cash available for immediate refunds. Dean had personally guaranteed a large part of North Star's credit line. If the company failed, the bank could pursue him. Dean called Ashbourne a family solution. He proposed that Trevor use the ballroom, kitchen, guest rooms, carriage house, parking area, and grounds for a few months until his finances recovered. He said the exposure would increase my property's value. I asked whether North Star had insurance, permits, staffing plans, security, or money for repairs. Dean paused, then accused me of turning a Christmas request into an interrogation. "No," I said. "The manor is not available." Within a week, a florist called to confirm delivery access for a January wedding. The next day, A caterer requested kitchen specifications. A rental company wanted to know where to place a heated tent. Finally, a couple named Aaron and Melissa called to discuss their New Year's Eve ceremony. They had paid North Star $12,000 and possessed a glossy packet identifying Ashbourne Manor as its exclusive new venue. I hired Rebecca Sloan, a real estate attorney I knew through work. She sent immediate notices to Trevor, Dean, North Star, and every vendor we could identify. The letters stated that I owned the property, had never authorized events, and would treat continued advertising as intentional misrepresentation. Trevor removed one social media post and replaced it with another that called the Manor our family's private estate. Dean responded by email. Attached was a 10-year commercial lease granting North Star immediate authority over the ballroom, kitchen, carriage house, guest rooms, parking area, and grounds. The annual rent was $1. My signature appeared on the final page. Beside it sat a notarization from Curtis Bell. The signature was mine, but I had not written it there. It had been copied from an old family financial authorization I signed 2 years earlier when Dean refinanced a warehouse. The spacing, slant, and small break in the final letter matched perfectly. The lease carried a date from the previous month when I had spent 3 days in Chicago at a mandatory land records conference. Hotel receipts, flight records, badge scans, and photographs placed me hundreds of miles from Curtis's notary seal. I forwarded everything to Rebecca. She called within minutes and told me not to contact my family directly. While we spoke, my gate camera sent an alert. A locksmith van, a moving truck, and 3 dark SUVs were turning onto the Manor Road. At 4:20 on December 18th, a locksmith van stopped outside my gate. The moving truck parked behind it, blocking half the narrow road. Dean stepped from the first SUV with Valerie, Trevor, and Curtis Bell, a locksmith I later learned was Owen Price, climbed out carrying a tool case. The truck's rear door opened, revealing folding tables, office chairs, box decorations, event signs, computer monitors, and several suitcases. Nothing about their arrival resembled a Christmas visit. Dean pressed the intercom and ordered me to open the gate. I answered through the speaker and told everyone to leave. He held the fake lease toward the camera and said I had voluntarily agreed to rescue Trevor's company. Then changed my mind because Rebecca had pressured me. Valerie moved closer to the intercom and used the careful voice she reserved for strangers. She told Owen that I had isolated myself in a large house, rejected family support, and was no longer making reasonable decisions. She never used a medical label. She did not need one. Her performance suggested that my refusal was evidence of instability. I walked outside but stayed behind the locked gate. I own this property, I said. I signed no lease. You do not have permission to enter. Curtis opened a leather folder and displayed the document as though presentation could create authenticity. He warned that interfering with a commercial tenant could expose me to damages. Trevor stood beside him, filming with his phone. He announced that North Star had staff arriving and clients depending on the opening. Dean said I could discuss my objections after they moved their equipment inside. I called the police. A county patrol officer arrived 12 minutes later. He reviewed my recorded deed on a tablet, then examined the alleged lease. Dean spoke over me, insisting that ownership was not disputed because I had supposedly granted possession to North Star. Curtis emphasized his notarization. Rebecca joined by speakerphone and explained that the signature was challenged. The lease had not been authorized, and formal notices were already being prepared. The officer did not pretend he could authenticate a signature beside the road. He said the document conflict might require civil review, but he also told Dean clearly that no one had permission to damage the gate or force access while the owner directly denied consent. He warned that a disputed did not authorize immediate self-help. Then he turned to Owen and asked whether he intended to drill the lock after hearing me refuse entry. Owen closed his case. No, he said. Not under these circumstances. Curtis pulled Dean aside. Their conversation was too quiet for the gate microphone, but Dean's face hardened as he listened. Finally, he pointed at me and said I was destroying Trevor's future over a technicality. I answered that a forged signature was not a technicality. Trevor stopped filming. They left after 20 minutes, as the vehicles turned around. My exterior camera caught Trevor walking near the utility equipment beside the stone wall. He disappeared behind the truck for less than a minute. I could not see his hands or prove what he did. At 7:13 that evening, the electricity failed. The boiler shut down. The gate camera went dark. My phone switched to battery power as the temperature inside began dropping. The utility company's emergency representative found something stranger than an ordinary outage. Someone had submitted a request to transfer service from my name to North Star Celebrations, claiming the company had taken possession under a lease. An electrician arrived with the utility crew. He found deliberate damage to exterior equipment, but the camera angle did not identify who caused it. He restored temporary power and documented everything for police. I reported the service transfer request as fraudulent. While I dealt with the outage, Valerie published a long social media post. She claimed I had invited Trevor's company to use the manor, accepted his help preparing it, and then humiliated my family in freezing weather. She described Dean as a heartbroken father trying to save Christmas. Relatives I had not heard from in years called me selfish. Local clients accused me of ruining weddings. One message said I had stolen a venue from couples who had already paid. I saved every post and comment. Rebecca advised me not to answer publicly. At 10:46, Trevor sent one direct message from a new account. "You cannot stop the opening." I took a screenshot before blocking him. Then, another notification appeared from a rental vendor. It contained a delivery schedule for December 24th, 6 days away, listing Ashbourne Manor as North Star's official reopening location. The schedule named the ballroom, kitchen, and east lawn, proving they had planned the takeover before arriving at my gate. This was no impulsive family argument. It was an organized occupation. By midnight, the manor was dark, the heat was falling, and my evidence folder was growing. I moved into the library where the fireplace still worked and built a timeline across a folding table. Each document received a date, source, and short description. I saved the fake lease in its original electronic form, exported the message headers, photographed the utility damage, preserved Trevor's advertisements, and captured Valerie's posts before she could edit them. My work had taught me that a dramatic accusation was weaker than an ordinary record created at the right time. The next morning, I reported the unauthorized utility request, placed additional verification on my accounts, froze access to new credit in my name, and filed an identity misuse report. Rebecca delivered copies of the lease and my Chicago records to the police. I hired the electrician to complete permanent repairs and install a separate backup supply for cameras and alarms. A security company mounted independent cameras inside the entrance hall, near the service corridor, and above the carriage house doors. None of those steps made Ashbourne feel festive, but each one made another surprise less likely. I could not use private databases for personal revenge, and I did not try. Instead, I searched lawful public records related to North Star Celebrations, reviewed court filings, examined business liens, and compared advertising dates. Rebecca contacted affected clients and vendors who were willing to share their own contracts. The picture formed quickly. North Star had accepted approximately $380,000 in deposits. 14 couples were waiting for refunds or replacement venues. Several payments had been used for operating expenses after the original mill received violation notices, meaning Trevor continued booking events while knowing the location might close. Dean had personally guaranteed North Star's credit line. Curtis had submitted the Ashbourne lease to a lender as proof that the company had secured a new venue. Trevor's first advertisement for the manor had appeared 2 days before Dean ever called me. Valerie had contacted clients herself and described Ashbourne as a family-owned property undergoing a management transfer. Rebecca found another critical detail. Curtis's notary journal contained no legitimate entry showing that I had appeared before him on the lease date. The numbered seal recorded on my document did not match the sequence of his surrounding entries. My Chicago hotel bill, airline itinerary, conference badge scans, and time-stamped group photographs created a record of where I had been. The supposed signing could not have occurred as described. Detective Marcus Reed took over the fraud investigation. He was patient in a way that initially frustrated me. He explained that suspicious paperwork still required authentication, interviews, and proof of intent. A forged lease alone could produce arguments about who copied what and when. A return to Ashbourne after clear written notice, however, would establish a simpler question. Had they knowingly entered property after being forbidden? Rebecca prepared no trespass notices naming Dean Bennett, Valerie Bennett, Trevor Bennett, Curtis Bell, and North Star Celebrations. A process server delivered each notice. Copies were mailed, emailed, and posted at the gate. They had no permission to enter the grounds, direct workers onto the property, use the manor's address, or represent that North Star controlled any part of it. That afternoon, Tessa Whitaker, a local investigative reporter, contacted me. She had seen Valerie's accusations and wanted my response. I declined. I had no reason to trust someone whose business depended on a public story. Tessa did not pressure me. Instead, she verified the original venue closure, contacted unpaid couples, found North Star's false advertisements, and confirmed that a police report existed. 2 days later, she sent Rebecca a list of facts and asked whether we wished to correct anything before publication. Her list was accurate. The final piece arrived. A rental vendor emailed me a Christmas Eve setup schedule intended for Trevor. It listed trucks, workers, tables, signs, temporary office equipment, and a 9:45 arrival. Trevor had told vendors Ashbourne would officially open that night. He had not canceled after the notices. He had expanded the plan. Marcus did not suggest that I confront them alone. Instead, he coordinated with Rebecca and the county prosecutor's office. We arranged an evidence preservation meeting inside Ashbourne for Christmas Eve. Tessa agreed to attend along with Aaron and Melissa and another couple who had lost a deposit. A representative from the title insurer came to document the real deed and chain of ownership. Officers waited nearby with several positioned inside the detached carriage house and service wing. We kept the front rooms dark. The ballroom doors remained closed. The interior cameras recorded continuously while a monitor in the library showed the gate, porch, and entrance hall. At 9:30, everyone took their assigned place. I stood behind the interior door holding no weapon and planning no speech. My only task was to let them make their own choices on camera. At 9:47, headlights finally appeared beyond the trees outside. At 9:47, the outer camera caught the first headlights. Dean's SUV reached the gate, followed by Valerie's car, the moving truck, and Owen's locksmith van. Trevor stepped out first and aimed his phone at the manor. His live stream opened with a smile and the words, "North Star is finally home." Workers climbed from the truck while Curtis removed the fake lease from his folder. The no trespass notice was fixed to the gate at eye level. Dean tore it down, folded it, and pushed it into his coat pocket. Owen asked whether the dispute had been resolved. Curtis held up the lease and said Hale had abandoned the property after granting possession to North Star. Dean added that a lawyer had tried to frighten everyone with meaningless notices. Owen hesitated. The outer lock had been damaged and replaced with a temporary mechanism. Curtis repeated that North Star was the lawful tenant. Owen opened the damaged access point, but he refused to approach the manor. He stayed near the gate with his tools closed. Dean, Valerie, Trevor, and Curtis crossed the grounds. Trevor kept streaming. He told viewers that the family had reclaimed its venue after an unfortunate misunderstanding. Valerie waved the workers forward and described where holiday displays would stand. Dean reached the porch and ordered a worker to open the front door. Within minutes, the lock yielded to people who had been told to stay out. Dean entered first. Trevor followed with event signs and announced that they finally controlled the property. Valerie called back to the movers, telling them to unload tables and office equipment. Curtis crossed last, keeping the fake lease visible. I waited until all four stood inside. Then I opened the interior door and walked into the entrance hall. "You received written notice," I said. "Leave my property now." Dean lifted the lease. "North Star possesses this property. You can challenge the agreement in court, but you cannot interfere with the tenant." Trevor turned his phone toward me. His live stream continued. Valerie told the workers I was creating another scene. Curtis said my attorney's notices did not cancel a signed commercial lease. I looked at Dean. "Are you refusing to leave after receiving written notice?" "Yes," he said. "We are not leaving our own venue." The service corridor door opened. Detective Marcus Reed entered with 2 uniformed officers. More officers came through the front and side doors. Marcus identified Dean, Valerie, Trevor, and Curtis by name and told everyone to remain still. The movers backed toward the porch. Trevor's smile vanished, but his phone kept broadcasting. The ballroom doors opened. Tessa Whitaker stepped out with her camera, followed by Aaron and Melissa. The second affected couple, Rebecca, and the title preservation representative. Camera flashes filled the hall. Melissa held her North Star contract. Aaron recorded the scene. The representative carried a certified copy of my deed. Dean saw the real deed in Marcus's hand and the fake lease inside an evidence sleeve. His face changed. "No, this can't be happening. Don't do this." Marcus said the lease was already under investigation. My travel records disproved the claim notarization date. Curtis's journal did not support the acknowledgement, and everyone inside had received formal notice barring entry. Officers had also watched them cross the grounds after Dean removed the posted notice. He displayed the deed, the delivered notices, and still images from the gate camera. Each item answered an excuse before Dean could make it. For the first time that night, my father understood that the room had been prepared for his denial. Trevor reached for his screen. "This is private," he said, trying to end the live stream. "It was public when you started broadcasting," Tessa replied. The stream had captured Trevor calling Ashbourne North Star's property, Curtis describing the lease as valid, and Dean refusing to leave. Trevor stopped the video, but copies were already circulating. Aaron held up a receipt for $12,000. Melissa showed the event packet identifying my home as their venue. The second couple produced a contract signed after North Star knew the original mill had closed. Trevor said refunds were being processed. Melissa answered that he had said that for 3 months. Curtis moved toward the door with the original lease. An officer stopped him and directed him to place the folder on a table for preservation. Curtis insisted he was merely a witness. Marcus reminded him that his seal appeared on the challenged notarization. Dean called the invasion a private family misunderstanding and accused Marcus of humiliating respectable people on Christmas Eve. I did not raise my voice. "You made it a property case when you forged my name," I said. "And Trevor made it public when he sold weddings inside my home." Dean stared at me as officers separated the group. "You are choosing strangers over your family." "No, I am choosing the people who did not try to take my home." Marcus arrested Dean and Trevor for conduct the officers witnessed, and charges supported by the existing evidence. Valerie and Curtis were removed, questioned separately, and included in the investigation. Owen handed over his work order and messages. The movers were released after giving their names. As Dean passed me, he whispered that I would regret making this permanent. I answered that he had mistaken permanence for permission. The front door closed behind him. But the case had only begun. The arrests were immediate, but the consequences took months. Investigators authenticated records, interviewed vendors, compared messages, examined financial accounts through proper legal process, and determined who knew what at each stage. Professional boards conducted separate reviews. The delay was frustrating, but it also prevented Dean from dismissing the outcome as one emotional decision made by one officer. North Star's records showed that Trevor knowingly sold events at Ashbourne without permission. He had advertised the Manor before speaking to me, accepted new payments after the original venue closed, and used the fake lease to reassure vendors and clients. The Christmas Eve livestream captured his claim of control, while his messages showed that he knew about the no trespass notice. He eventually pleaded guilty to charges connected to theft by deception, identity misuse, criminal trespass, and property damage. Trevor received 11 months in county custody, followed by 3 years of supervised probation. The court ordered restitution and prohibited him from operating another event company during probation. North Star Celebrations was dissolved. Its remaining furniture, office equipment, decorations, and vehicles were sold. The proceeds did not make every couple whole, but they were divided among creditors and affected clients under court supervision. Dean's role was harder for him to explain away. Emails showed that he directed the property takeover, pressured Owen, discussed the false lease before sending it to me, and understood that I had never signed it. He had no prior criminal record, so he avoided a long custodial sentence. He received 6 months of home confinement, 3 years of probation, community service, restitution for repairs, and an order prohibiting contact with me. Legal expenses and restitution forced him to sell one of his storage company's warehouse properties. Several commercial clients ended their contracts after the court record became public. Valerie was not treated as an innocent observer. Her messages showed that she contacted couples, described Ashbourne as family-owned, and helped coordinate the Christmas Eve arrival. Her public accusations also continued after she learned the lease was disputed. The criminal evidence against her was less direct than the evidence against Dean and Trevor. But the civil case was not. She agreed to remove her posts, publish a written correction, pay part of my legal expenses, and accept permanent no contact. There was no private conversation afterward, and no scene in which she explained that she had only been protecting her son. Curtis faced the consequence he feared most. The state disciplinary authority suspended his law license while the notarization was investigated. His journal, seal sequence, email exchanges, and my Chicago alibi established that I had never appeared before him. He later admitted the acknowledgement was false. He lost his license, received probation and financial penalties, and faced professional liability claims from people who had relied on the document. The lease he once waived at my gate became the clearest evidence of his own misconduct. Owen cooperated from the beginning of the formal investigation. He provided work orders, messages, payment records, and the documents Dean had shown him. Because he refused the first forced entry, remained near the gate during the second, and helped establish what he had been told. Prosecutors did not treat him as a principal conspirator. Rebecca obtained a permanent civil order barring Dean, Valerie, and Trevor from contacting me or entering any property I owned. Dean sent letters asking for a private meeting. I returned each envelope through Rebecca without opening it. I did not meet him at a hospital, answer a final phone call, attend a family dinner, or offer conditional forgiveness. I repaired Ashbourne through the summer. The roof was stabilized, the boiler replaced, the ballroom floor restored, and the damaged entrance secured. 8 months after Christmas, I sold the manor to a regional historic preservation foundation. Dean did not drive me out. I sold because Ashbourne had completed its purpose. It had given my refusal a physical boundary, a recorded deed, a locked door, and witnesses who could hear the word no without translating it into negotiation, with part of the proceeds. I opened a small land records consultancy near Baltimore. I helped attorneys, preservation groups, and ordinary buyers trace ownership problems before those problems became lawsuits. I purchased a practical brick house with a bright kitchen, a modest office, and exactly as many rooms as I wanted to maintain. The following Christmas, one certified envelope arrived from Dean. I gave it unopened to Rebecca and requested its return. Then I silenced my phone and joined two close friends for dinner. We ate soup, exchanged inexpensive gifts, argued cheerfully over a board game, and washed the dishes together. No one performed happiness for a camera. No one discussed the Bennett family. An empty chair was simply an empty chair. Not a message about who deserved to belong. People sometimes describe my ending as revenge because police entered under flashing cameras. And my father lost the he assumed he possessed. That is not how I understand it. Wealth did not save me. The Manor did not save me. Documentation, witnesses, boundaries, and patient legal work did. I stopped accepting private conversations where the loudest relative could rewrite the facts. I protected my identity, preserved evidence, and allowed consequences to continue after the dramatic moment ended. Blood relationship is not permanent permission. A parent does not gain ownership of an adult child's labor, money, home, or silence by calling exploitation a family emergency. Forgiveness may help some people, but it is not a debt owed to anyone who refuses accountability. I did not forgive them. I did not call, and I did not go back. Selling the Manor was not surrender. The house had already done its job. It gave me one place where my father finally had to hear the word no. We surely appreciate you spending your time with the story. Our characters, events, and situations in this video are fictional and submitted only for storytelling, entertainment, and educational purposes. We hope the message reminds you that when someone betrays your trust, the most important thing is not whether they regret it, but whether you finally understand what you deserve. Peace begins when you stop giving repeated chances to people who only change after consequences arrive.